Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Hua. This is our Halloween horror story fest. I hope that you have been enjoying our Halloween stories. If you have one you would like to submit, you can send it to my email, which is located in the link down below. Thank you so much for all of you who have submitted a story so far. I appreciate all of your love, your support. If you have not subscribed to my channel yet, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I appreciate and I thank you. This is a story called Julynn, which is an original written by me. This is a story that should be listened to by mature audiences. I hope that you enjoy. I'm waiting for you. Come on, let's go. Julynn jerked away from the deep baritone voice that seemed to seduce her from her dream. She turned to the clock on the wall. 3 a.m. The same time that seemed to haunt her as she turned slowly in her bed. The blanket was tugged around her legs, and as she pulled, it was released too quickly, and she ended up slapping herself in the face. Ow! Shit, she whispered. She sat up and rubbed her eyes, her ears ringing and her body weak. She threw her legs over the bed, stood, and walked to the window where she lifted the white curtains to look out. New York City's lights stared back at her, with the white-covered snow sidewalks as cars zoomed about. What the hell were people doing out at 3 in the morning? She placed her hand on the window pane and felt the cold suppress her heat. A tear squeezed through her eye, and she murmured a curse word heard too often in her ears. Turning away, she let out a shaky breath, and as she walked toward the bathroom door, tripped over something and fell. Hitting the ground knee first, and her floor being hardwood, she groaned and swore loudly. She turned to see what had caught her foot and realized it was a picture frame. It was too dark to see, and she got up to turn on the light. As she turned to look at the ground, a frame stared at her with a photo inside. A photo of herself with her parents as a young child. Her mother was holding her hand, and her father was standing proudly beside them. This photo was taken shortly before coming to America, and Julynn was about 5 years old. She picked it up and stared at it, running her fingers over the image of her parents. What was this doing on the ground? Placing it back on the dresser, she turned to go when she heard something fall and break. She turned around and saw that it was the same photo she had just put away. Feeling a bit uneasy, she walked slowly to where the picture frame laid and turned it over. The glass had broken across her mother's face, causing her entire upper body to look dismantled. As she touched it, she accidentally nipped her finger, and droplets of blood fell on the photo. Shit, Julynn said, as she brought her finger to suck in her mouth. Shit, shit, shit. She set the frame on the dresser and walked to the bathroom where she ran her injured finger under the cold water. As she bandaged her finger, she walked back out to find the frame sitting in the middle of the bed, unbroken, and her mother's smiling face stared back at her. She stopped dead in her tracks. The room vibrated around her, and she felt the air go cold. And then the lights went out. That was when Julynn felt a cold hand around her ankle and screamed. Julia, Julynn jerked awake and realized she was in the hospital bed. Her hands and feet were restrained, the IV machine beeping before her, and the smell of death around. The light from the ceiling hurt her eyes, and she saw that the curtains were drawn. What happened? She swallowed and felt her throat was dry and scratchy. She moved a finger to tap the nurse button. She saw the door open and then heard feet walking in. Hello? Julynn asked. How did I get here? What happened? She looked and saw a pair of bony, dark fingers reach to withdraw the curtains. It revealed a nurse wearing an old white uniform and a hat with a red cross on it. Her hair was tied back, and she was smiling. But her gums were black, and her eyes were foggy. She smiled, and then her jaw broke, hanging out with missing teeth. Hi, Julia. Katola. Kachiwata. Julynn screamed. It jerked her awake. She found she was surrounded by her sister and medical staff in a hospital room, restrained and hooked to IV lines. The nurses and doctor around her tried to stabilize her, and as she screamed and screamed, the person she saw standing at the door was a handsome man who she recognized from the many dreams she'd had. He was smiling, watching her, and extending an arm. Julia! Juna! You're going to hurt yourself! She heard her sister's voice shouting at her. And then everything went black. This is not the first time something like this has happened, Julynn heard her sister's voice saying. Julynn has been having visions since a little girl. My parents tried everything for her and it didn't work. You know, some people say that she was supposed to be a shaman, but Julynn refused that path. She married an abusive man, suffered multiple miscarriages, and tried to commit suicide many times. My parents both just gave up on her. Julynn cut ties with all of us a long time ago because we didn't agree with her ways. She didn't even attend the funeral of our parents either. The last time I saw her was, 6 years ago. How did you even know to call me? Julynn heard the doctor's voice. Well, she still had you listed as an emergency contact, but it was from many years ago, and we weren't even sure the number would still work, but I guess we got lucky. She's not well. Julynn sat up. Jeez. Just talk about me like I'm not here, okay? Julynn found her younger sister, Mina, jerk her head toward her. Unlike Julynn, Mina inherited their mother's side of the genes and was tall and slim. Julynn had been short and curvy. Between the two, the boys would chase after Mina, and their parents glorified Mina for the world to see. Her parents had been unlucky in heirs, as their grandma used to say, and had only 2 girls before their mother's womb dried up. Julynn noticed that Mina was wearing a ring on her finger. Huh, her little sister had gotten hitched. When did that happen? Julia, Mina said with a tearful sob. She came to hug her, but Julynn turned her sister away. Why'd you have to call her? Julynn growled. The doctor, a pretty brunette who was twice their height with tender blue eyes, walked forward. Julynn, I'm Dr. Patterson. She was listed as your emergency contact. We did call your ex-husband, but he said he had nothing to do with you anymore, so the next person down the line was Mina. Get her out of here. I don't want her here. Julia, Mina cried. Dr. Patterson gave out a deep sigh. I'm sorry, Mina. If Julynn prefers that, then I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Good. Get that goody two-shoe out of here. Why are you so frickin' mean? I flew here from Minnesota just to make sure you were okay. No one told you to, did they? I mean, admit it, Mina. You want me to die so you can continue this I'm holier than thou shit you always did when mom and dad were alive. Mina's voice broke. You heartless bitch. Julynn smiled. Yeah, that's me. A heartless bitch. Always was, always will be. Now, leave so this heartless bitch can take a dirt nap. Mina grabbed her purse and ran out the door. Dr. Patterson came to stand beside her and was about to reach out a hand to touch her when Julynn shook her head. I wouldn't do that if I were you. I'm toxic, doctor. You touch me and you'll be stained in my blood. Julynn, I understand you're hurting a lot, but your sister is here for support. Right now, I think it's what you need. She laughed. No. Right now, what I need is a Bloody fucking Mary. The kind that is spicy and can cure this shithole I have burning in my heart. What is really hurting that you can't seem to let go? The doctor asked. Julynn turned her eyes to her, and then somehow tears filled them. Do you really want to know? Or are you looking to write something fancy in your file so that you have something new to update your superior? Dr. Patterson smiled and pulled a chair to sit down. Julynn, I see this negative vibe as a shield. What negative vibe? This negative vibe you give off to people. The truth is that you're really scared, aren't you? If you don't put this up, you might end up loving them, and it's wrong, isn't it? To love someone you're supposed to hate? Julynn swallowed, and then a tear dropped down her cheek. What, do they teach you that in medical school? No. It was taught in my own home growing up. To have sympathy for those who can't find it. Julynn looked at her hands that were strained. They looked old, even though she wasn't even 30. She looked up at the doctor, who held no hint of irony in her eyes. She felt the need to speak, and finally she opened her mouth. They left me when I needed them most. Do you know what that's like? To be abandoned by your own parents? No, I don't. But you can help me to understand. What happened? Julynn let out a long sigh. Can you untie me? I feel I can't be honest with you when I'm positioned this way. Dr. Patterson put her file aside and reached out to unclasp the restraints. Julynn rubbed her wrists as the doctor worked on the clasp from her ankles. She felt blood move through her veins and sensation brought back to her arms and legs. Thank you, she said. You're welcome. Julynn tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, and she looked up with trembling lips. I was raped by my uncle, and my father wanted to save face, so he told me to pretend it never happened. Oh my God, Dr. Patterson said. But my uncle was also the most well-known person in the community. At event gatherings, he was the one who sat at the head of the table, and everyone bowed and acknowledged. I was only 10 when it first started. Wait, Dr. Patterson interrupted. What do you mean when it started? You mean it wasn't stopped? Julynn looked up. No one believed me, and everyone told me to just keep quiet. If I said anything, my uncle would be ruined. But you were ruined. I didn't matter. I was just a girl who would marry outside her family anyway. And your father did nothing? No. It continued until I was 13. That was when I first ran away. And when I returned, my father locked me in the basement and shaved my hair off. That was when I knew that if I didn't run away for good, no one would protect me. And if my uncle had his way, he would continue raping me until I either became pregnant or until I got married. But who would want me when I wasn't a maiden anymore? Who would want someone who was broken? Julynn began to cry. I left the house when I was 14 and lived off the streets until I was 16. I began working, returned to school. You see, my entire life, I never had anyone but myself. You know the story my sister told you about me marrying someone abusive, having multiple miscarriages, and me trying to take my own life? That's a story my parents made up to my sister and everyone else so no one would know the truth about me. When I met my husband, I took all that anger out on him. And so he left me because I couldn't see the good in him. How did you ever survive? Dr. Patterson asked. I survived by promising myself I would never allow anyone to hurt me again. But one thing my sister said was true. I was destined to be a shaman, and I just couldn't do it because I was living off the streets. The visions have gotten worse, and I can't push them out. The universe on the other side is calling me, wanting to bring me home, but I can't go because I'm not finished on Earth. What are you talking about? What do you mean you're not finished on Earth? I'm scared to say this out loud. Can you lean in a bit closer? The doctor leaned in, and Julynn's eyes razored in on the pen in the pocket. In one instant, she had it in her hands and was gouging the doctor's eyes out. The blood decorated the sheets of the bed, staining Julynn a mere crimson shade. She stood on shaky legs, and that was when she saw the demon sitting in the corner and applauding. Smiling, she gathered the sheets, wiped the excess blood off of her, and began to walk out the door. The visions made her head hurt. Her hands were heavy. Her feet, she didn't know where to take them. She didn't want to do this. As soon as the first nurse saw her, screams were heard and alarms went off. Bloody footprints followed a staggering Julynn as she fell to the ground and began to crawl. She saw the handsome man waiting for her at the end of the hallway. He was smiling. His eyes were black and his teeth were sharp. As he opened his mouth, a long black forked tongue whipped out, and black fog began to fill the room. Looking around her, she saw little demon girls with black strands jumping up and down, their eyes fogged and white, their skin a grayish with black dots that appeared to have worms slithering in and out. They were screaming and clapping with joy. Julynn began to cry. I've had enough of all of you. You've followed me for too long. And today, I shall take away the one thing that can't make you live anymore. She smiled as the people around her began running. Julynn raised the pen and stabbed her own throat. Mean Julia, kuya ku thọ si tia thấu có chữ chín trên có ư nỉ lìa có ya pay tan thọ là chế min sai là chế nỉ thế gì mà mua cái hú có blia min sai nỉ sót tu xia vì nỉ gì chỉ sợ lu chỉ sợ nèo gì lu thêm mua tàu nữ từ min chu nữ mi pli là để xin hú nó sợ lo Julia sợ lo nữ tư là sợ chế lo mà lo min sai. The sun breaks, and Julynn sees a dirt red path, and a golden sun rises. Over the rice fields, she sees her parents waving to her. She descends down the hill with a happy grin on her face. to be her parents' innocent daughter once again. Ủa chào anh trường ti làm nông ra đan nương thế ra đan nương là giờ ra ủa cũng mất sâu chỉ tạo kia là dễ đâu biết số lần số tuổi sư niềm nông ta là nó chỉ soi kén nó chỉ soi trái mình chưa bị là nhóm bố mình ba mình chạy nó mò để mà lấy xin chi đùa